Well, I have been wandering around Kojori for a couple of days now, and I am fascinated by the strange combination of decay and, what can I call it, sophistication. This place is growing in price to live here. It's a perfect location. It's about 1,300 meters up, about 4,500 feet above sea level. It's got a lot of interesting homes, and yet when you are on the main drag on the highway, the Kojori highway, its town square is strangely empty. There is a fountain, which yesterday was not working, today is working, and that helped. But it's just a perfunctory fountain, and basically in the middle of a parking lot. And then there are 3 chain stores. A Spar, a Nikora, which is the best, has the most food, and an Aversi pharmacy. And then there's a fruit stand, a little independent fruit stand, and another one. And I see on the map there's a couple more little markets that I might run into tomorrow. And yet there's over 1,500 people here, which should provide a bit more business than that. But it doesn't, because so many of the people here, and the reason for the higher prices, is that it is people from Tbilisi making this like a second home. It's a great place to get away in the summer. I think there might even be some kind of skiing in the winter up here, although certainly not very professional, but nevertheless sort of a homespun thing. But I'm fascinated by the history. There are very odd. Yesterday, and then today, I really explored what it turned out to be an old theater, and I mean a theater, not a movie theater, and large building. I didn't know what kind of building it was at first. And then as I went inside, I couldn't tell exactly what period it was from. Maybe the end of the independent era. There was actually a battle here in 1921 with what are called the Junkeris, or the Junkers, who were the cadets who this was one of the last battles before the Soviet Union took over Georgia again. But I'm amazed that if someone came to this place who had a sufficient income and will, they could change this into this absolutely beautiful resort. It wouldn't take much to make the center a very fascinating place. But it hasn't happened. And I even wonder what kind of town government it's got. A small town like this, not far from the city, is called the daba. And I don't know if it has an independent life. It must have something. But there are so many aspects of it that are left to rot. And then there are aspects of it which, especially when you see individual homes that are just completely beautiful. And in Georgian style, whenever you go to a smaller village, everybody is blocked off from one another, which is really strange, but I guess it prevents the cows from getting in. Nobody can quite see what you're doing, which is an interesting aspect of Georgian life. On one hand, they're very welcoming, and the host family I'm staying with here is certainly very welcoming. And on the other hand, they have these walls outside of their houses, so you can't see in at all, which is very different, of course, than America, where, in some places, it is the custom to have an outdoor porch just to say hello to people as they pass by. But Georgians kind of live in their backyards, and I find the backyard here kind of interesting, filled with kakali, which is, I believe, walnuts, and plums, and vashli, which is apples. And everywhere I go, there are plums I can pick, and trees that are full of fruits in perfect Georgian style. But I really like it up here. And then if I am feeling up to it, I'm going to walk all the way back, about 15 miles. Is it 15 miles? No, it's about 15 kilometers, so it's about 9 miles back. But except for the first part, it's all downhill. Once you get to the Udzo monastery, it's all downhill. But anyway, this is Kojori. I hope you enjoy it. And tomorrow I'm going to try to get up to the fortress, which I'll talk about when I do that tomorrow. And I can see it from here. It's tempting me. So that is the Azeula Fortress that I decided to try to get to the next day. This is actually the place that I stayed, that little stone door, and I'm leaving. I was staying in the bottom part here, and you'll see that door again. It's really a fascinating door with like children's chalk drawings on it. I found that fascinating. So I'm going to leave. I have to close this huge metal door, and now I'm out in the street, and I am heading towards the fortress. Now, the fortress is really the most important sight to see here. And I'm passing these wonderful, I just love decayed fences and buildings. I have a theory about Georgia. There's a lot of recent kind of trashy, junky stuff. But if you leave anything out long enough in Georgia, it eventually becomes beautiful as it decays. And this is looking at a forest. This is like a creek running through this dark hollow. Kind of a fascinating place. A calf feeding on what? Pomegranate leaves or some sort of fruit tree leaf. And then just looking at some of the houses from, the walk along the road. It's a kind of a country road. There is a very tiny little fruit stand later. I didn't get a photo of it or anything like that. But this just gives you an idea of some of the trees that I passed as I was walking along this way, evidently not smoothly enough. But again, my theory about decay and the beauty of it here. Now I'm just going to continue walking, and that's really fascinating. So you have the wall, but then there's a nice little garden there. And I continue walking on my way to the Azeula Fortress. And actually, almost all the way there are houses along the way. And no mean dogs on this trip, although there are some, and I quote, bored, angry dogs that are supposed to be on the way to the Udzo Monastery. But we'll see when I actually do that in a couple of days here. And some of the houses are quite nice, like that one. And as I walked along, I saw different houses that appealed to me in different ways. And this is just going down the road. Now I'm actually getting closer. I would say that looking down this road, this is a newer house, not particularly interesting, but this is only about, I would say, 10 to 15 minutes away from the Azeula Monastery. And you see these nice yellow, reminds me of Switzerland and the trails there, signs pointing the way to go. And they are also in Latin script, so that's very helpful. And you can see the Azeula Fortress there. And so, one rather ugly structure being built there. Unfortunately, they just built a lot of these big, oversized cement structures. Now, this vehicle is an army vehicle pulling away from me, and actually, a man in a Jeep just before him stopped me and told me I couldn't go any further. And that was very disappointing. I really wanted to get to the Azeula Fortress, and that's about as close as I got. I was actually much closer than it looks like. I had gotten further than this, but this was a good place to stop and look back at the fortress. And evidently the views from up there are really beautiful, and if you ever go, get yourself there. He said I could come back at noon. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning when I was there, and I didn't feel like waiting around for several hours. So I walked back past a little park on the way, and this area here across from the park had some very nice buildings, including one behind this big fenced, walled-in area. But before I could do that, I have to look at little guy walking down the street, friendly dog, and you can kind of see this big, huge house behind the fence there, the walled fence. And then some hay being covered. Well, that's nice. Someone's feeding some animals, probably cows. And so I continued on down the road. And one thing I'm going to do right now, these are grapevines hanging over these pipes. And I'll talk about the pipes again a little bit later. But so there's grapevines, there's plums, there's apples, there's pears, there's cherries, all sorts of fruit everywhere you go here. And this is one of the features of Georgia. It is such a well-stocked land when it comes to provisions and what can grow there. It has an environment that's a lot like California in some places. Georgia is known for being the first place on earth to ferment wine. But they also have so many other kinds of fruits. And these are just literally wild or somewhat wild fruit trees everywhere you go. There's some sort of blackberry or raspberry growing there. It's just endless quantities of fruit. And those are walnuts. Yeah, so... And you keep looking around, it's darker, but wait, there's something red there, something purple there. So if you're ever in Georgia in the late summer, actually all the way through the summer, just go to any local fruit stand and get some fresh fruit. And who's that guy in that mirror there? Now, this is to go back to this concept of pipes. Now, this pipe goes over the road and down to the other side, and it's filled with gas
for heating and for stoves and cooking. And this was a Soviet thing. They did this. You'll see this in other documentaries about small Soviet villages and such. These above-ground gas pipes are just incredibly bizarre to me. I just think, I'm going to hit one. A decorated vehicle on the side of the road. I just love these shapes of the power towers being underneath it. Now, I'm looking at this power station, and this is on the power station grounds. There's no one stopping you from going in here. There's a wide open broken fence. And yet this is right near the power station for the little town of Kojori. And so I'm looking in here. There's all sorts of insulators, white broken insulators that kind of tempted me. Some of them weren't so bad. And I was thinking, what could I do with those? And maybe someday, if I come up with some idea, I'll go back up there and get some, since they're just kind of semi-broken on the ground. And this is just, I love the texture of this wood, and so I decided just to give you some texture, because who needs dull white walls and bad wallpaper when you could have a texture like this? And I believe texture like this is what we're meant to feast on, in a sense.
Well, thanks for coming with us today on Georgian Crossroads. It turns out this will be a 3-part series on Kojori and this area. So we're going to spend an entire episode just on the abandoned theater I found and some of the other abandoned buildings. I'm really fascinated by abandoned buildings, obviously. And then we'll probably do one episode on the walk down the hill, if I do that. Which, right now, the weather is perfect. There's clouds in the sky. It's not too hot. I feel like I'm on a vacation from the summer, which was the point.